a violent storm clawed at the windows of Greycourt Manor, its ancient stones trembling beneath the wind's fury. Inside, the grand parlour was lit by a trembling chandelier, casting long, uneasy shadows across velvet drapes and polished wood. At precisely 8:17 p.m., a sharp cry pierced the manor's hush. Servants rushed in, only to find Lord Alistair Greycourt collapsed beside the marble hearth, a half-finished glass of brandy by his hand. No wound, no struggle, only the faint smell of bitter almonds. Chapter 1. The Storm at Greycourt Manor. The storm announced its arrival long before it broke over the cliffs of Dorset. For hours the sky had brooded, swollen with clouds the colour of tarnished pewter, until the heavens could bear their burden no longer. With a violent crack that shook the tree-tops like a giant's roar, the downpour began, an unrelenting sheet of rain that shimmered in the moonlight like falling glass. Greycourt Manor, an ancient stone edifice perched upon the rugged coastline, stood defiantly against the onslaught, its towers rattling, its chimneys howling like restless spirits. It was the kind of night that seemed to encourage secrets to rise from the depths and walk among the living. Inside the manor, however, warmth flickered in the parlour where a single chandelier glowed above polished wood floors. The golden light danced across heavy velvet drapes and ornate carved mouldings. Despite the storm's fury outside, the room exuded a sense of cultivated comfort. Yet tonight, something in the air felt strained, as though the very walls held their breath. It was precisely 8:17 p.m. when the tranquillity shattered. A sharp cry, shrill, terrified, and undeniably human, pierced the manor's interior. It came from the parlour, where Lord Alistair Greycourt, master of the estate and patriarch of the household, had retired after dinner for his usual evening brandy. Servants from various wings converged upon the room, their footsteps thundering like a herd of frightened animals. The door swung open. There he lay. Lord Alistair's body was draped unnaturally across the rug beside the marble hearth, his right arm extended as though reaching for something he would never grasp. His face bore an expression of shock, eyes open wide, glassy, and staring at the ceiling. A half-filled glass of brandy rested near his limp hand, its dark amber liquid reflecting the flickering flame like a gleaming eye. There were no signs of struggle, no overturned furniture, not so much as a wrinkle in the carpet. Everything was agonizingly still, except, perhaps, for the faint smell in the air. One of the footmen leaned closer and blinked. "Do you smell that?" he whispered. A maid nodded, her face pale. Almond, but bitter. Moments later, footsteps echoed briskly in the hall, calm, precise, unmistakably composed amid chaos. Into the parlour stepped a small, impeccably dressed man in a tailored grey suit. His polished shoes made barely a sound on the wooden floor. A neat walking stick was tucked under his arm, but he did not rely on it. His posture was erect, elegant, and carried the unshakable self-assurance of a man who trusted wholly in the powers of his own mind. His waxed moustache, curled into symmetrical perfection, twitched ever so slightly as he surveyed the scene. "Hercule Poirot," announced Samuel Croft, the manor's butler, with a bow tinged by both respect and relief. "Inspector Townsend insisted we call for assistance outside the county, sir, and given Lord Greycourt's prominence, we thought it appropriate." Poirot nodded politely. "You have done well, monsieur. When a man of influence dies so suddenly, one must take no chances." His voice, smooth as Belgian velvet, carried easily despite its softness. "Now, permit me a moment." He crouched with meticulous care beside the body. The storm's roar muffled behind thick stone walls, creating an eerily insulated silence. Poirot leaned closer, inhaling with near-scientific precision. "Yes," he murmured, "cyanide. There is no doubt." Several maids gasped. Samuel's hand flew to his mouth. Poirot placed his fingertips delicately on the brandy glass. The liquid inside remained warm from the hearth's glow. A small trail of condensation glistened on the rim. "He drank recently," Poirot observed. He turned his gaze to the rest of the room, his sharp eyes taking everything in with the thoroughness of a cartographer mapping an unknown continent. The heavy drapes were undisturbed, the chairs aligned precisely where they had been earlier in the evening, and the table by the window bore only one ring of moisture, indicating one glass had sat there for some time. Yet there was something else, something small, easily overlooked. Poirot reached beneath the edge of the sofa and retrieved a gleaming object, a gold cufflink, intricately engraved with the letter C. He smiled slightly. "Ah, a clue presents itself." Before he could rise, hurried footsteps approached the doorway. Lady Evelyn Greycourt, the victim's wife, entered, her silk robe fluttering gently behind her, her hair loosened from its usual elaborate styling. She looked ethereal, like a ghost pulled into reality by the storm's violent summons. "Oh, dear God!" she choked out upon seeing her husband's lifeless form. One trembling hand clutched her chest. "Alistair!" Poirot stood and approached her. "Madame," he said gently, "you have my deepest sympathies. But I must ask, you saw your husband last?" Lady Evelyn shook her head. No. I retired early. We had quarrelled over trivial matters." Her breath hitched. "He poured his brandy and I left. I didn't think—" Her voice dissolved into quiet sobs. Poirot offered her a handkerchief, which she accepted with shaking fingers. Behind her, another figure appeared. Charles Avery, Lord Greycourt's secretary. He was a tall, thin man, with sharp cheekbones and an expression that looked perpetually pinched. His eyes darted from the body to Poirot, then back, as though calculating the implications of every glance. "Terrible," Avery muttered. "Just terrible. Who would do such a thing?" Poirot watched him for a moment. "You seem unsettled, monsieur." Avery bristled. "Wouldn't any man be? My employer is dead." "Perhaps," Poirot replied softly. "But you are not any man. You were dismissed only days ago, n'est-ce pas?" A flicker of anger crossed Avery's face. He had no right to accuse me of disloyalty. I served him faithfully for years. Poirot did not respond. Instead, he bent once more by the body, lifting the deceased's hand delicately. No signs of defensive wounds, no scratches or bruises. The murder, if it was murder, had been carried out quietly and with precision. "Poirot," Samuel began nervously, "I must mention, before the scream, I heard voices, raised voices." "Voices?" Poirot echoed. "Plural." Samuel nodded. It sounded as though Lord Greycourt was arguing with someone. Poirot's brow arched. "And you did not think this important earlier?" I wasn't certain, sir. With the storm, sounds are often deceiving." Poirot walked toward the mantelpiece. A series of framed portraits adorned it. Alistair with his late parents, Alistair at Eton, Alistair posing beside a prized hunting trophy. A fire crackled warmly in the grate, its flames licking charred wood. But Poirot's eyes narrowed. The hearth was too clean. Most fires in old manors leave ash trails, soot scatter, imperfections repaired hastily by servants. Yet this one bore signs of recent attention. Someone had swept meticulously, even while the logs still burned. Poirot knelt and examined the area. "Something was burned here tonight," he said quietly, "and recently." Samuel stiffened. I lit the fire an hour before dinner, sir. I did nothing more. Poirot's gaze drifted to the brass fire tool beside the grate. A faint smudge, not soot but something darker, stained the handle. He rose with a small nod. The parlour holds many secrets tonight. A thunderclap shook the room violently, and the lights flickered. The storm showed no sign of relenting. Lady Evelyn had moved closer to her husband's body, but Poirot touched her arm lightly. "Please, madame, do not disturb him further. The police will be here shortly." Clara Greycourt, the victim's adopted daughter, appeared next, her youthful face flushed with fear. She clutched a book to her chest, a habit Poirot noted immediately, for grief rarely encouraged reading. Something in her eyes gleamed with a mixture of sorrow and unease. "Father," she whispered weakly, "he was alive earlier. He was writing something in the study. I saw him." Poirot turned sharply. "Writing, mademoiselle? What?" "I don't know," Clara said, shaking her head. He looked upset. I tried to ask him what was wrong, but he told me to leave. And then someone entered the study. I heard them. The door shut, and when it opened again, the person hurried away. Did you see who it was?" "No, but it was a tall man." Poirot's gaze flashed briefly toward Avery, then toward Samuel. Both stiffened. "Did your father drink brandy often before his death?" Poirot asked Clara gently. "Every night," she replied, "but he never drank alone. Usually he invited someone to join him." "Someone?" Poirot repeated. "Whom?" Clara hesitated. "I don't know. I never saw their face, but I know he shared a second glass." Poirot's expression sharpened. He turned back to the table where the single brandy glass sat faintly sweating. "A second glass," he murmured. Poirot moved slowly, scanning each surface as though his eyes were fine-tuned instruments. Then something caught his attention. A sliver of polished glass reflecting the firelight from behind the mantel clock. He reached behind it and withdrew the object. Another glass, half hidden, smudged faintly at the rim. He held it up. "Voilà," he announced softly. "Proof that Lord Greycourt was not drinking alone." Lady Evelyn paled visibly. Charles Avery swallowed hard. Samuel wrung his hands. Poirot's voice dropped to a near whisper, grave and certain. "The presence of this second glass means that whoever shared his drink may well be responsible for adding the poison. And that person, mes amis, is undoubtedly still inside this manor." Lightning flashed, thunder roared, and Greycourt Manor seemed to pulse with fear as the storm tightened its grip. Chapter 2. The first interviews. The storm did not abate. If anything, it grew more ferocious, as if the sky itself demanded to bear witness to what would unfold within Greycourt Manor's ancient walls. Lightning forked across the heavens, illuminating the long, echoing corridors in ghostly flashes. Each rumble of thunder seemed to shake dust from the chandeliers, unsettling the servants and heightening the tension that coiled through every hallway like a taut wire ready to snap. Hercule Poirot moved with quiet command through the manor's central hall, tapping his walking stick lightly on the marble floor with every step. Not out of necessity, but out of rhythm. A metronome for the workings of his little grey cells. The butler, Samuel Croft, guided him toward the drawing-room, where he had requested all members of the household be gathered for initial questioning. "Inspector Townsend will arrive within the hour," Samuel murmured nervously. "But the roads, with this storm—" Poirot lifted a hand gently. "We shall not depend on the English countryside to provide its hospitality, mon ami. We proceed as we must." Samuel nodded, though his eyes betrayed unease. The manor felt different now, less a home more a vessel trapped in a tempest with a murderer somewhere aboard. When Poirot entered the drawing-room, all eyes shifted to him. The spacious chamber, upholstered in deep burgundy tones, had the air of a private club rather than a family's gathering place. The fire crackled steadily, providing the only warmth in a room otherwise chilled by fear. Lady Evelyn sat closest to the flames, her posture erect despite trembling fingers that fidgeted endlessly with the lace trim of her sleeve. Charles Avery leaned against a bookcase, arms crossed tightly, gaze darting from person to person in restless suspicion. Clara sat curled upon a chaise near the window, her breath fogging the glass as she stared toward the storm. Dr. Malcolm Hargreaves, the family physician, stood stiffly near the doorway, wringing his hat in both hands. Poirot approached the centre of the room. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began softly, his voice a soothing yet commanding balm. "I thank you for cooperating during such distress. Tonight, your master has died, suddenly, tragically, and under circumstances most unnatural." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle upon them like fresh snow. "One among us may possess knowledge, perhaps even guilt, that we must uncover before dawn. So, I ask that you answer with honesty. It is the only path to truth." He turned toward Lady Evelyn. "Madame, with your permission, I would like to begin with you." Lady Evelyn inhaled deeply and nodded. Poirot sat across from her, folding his hands neatly atop his cane. "You were the last known person to see your husband alive. You said you quarrelled. About what, madame?" Her eyes shimmered with restrained tears. "It was nothing of consequence, a personal matter." Poirot tilted his head. "The personal matters, madame, are often the most consequential." She managed a faint sigh. "He was angry because I asked him again to finalize the new inheritance arrangements. Clara deserved more. I believed he was being unfair. He refused to discuss it and sent me away." Clara looked up in surprise but said nothing. "Then," Evelyn whispered, "I went upstairs to my room. I did not leave it until I heard the scream." Poirot watched her intently. She appeared fragile, but he had encountered many who appeared fragile moments before unravelling wicked truths. "You noticed something earlier," Poirot said, lowering his voice. "When I revealed the second glass, you paled. Why?" Evelyn's hands tightened on her lap. Because I suspected he was meeting someone in secret. Alistair often did. He conducted private conversations with people outside the household." Her gaze drifted toward Avery, in the last few months especially. Avery stiffened. "Are you implying something, Lady Greycourt?" "I'm stating only what I observed." Poirot interjected, "Calm, mes amis. Emotions do not aid clarity." He turned to the secretary. "Monsieur Avery, your relationship with Lord Greycourt had become strained, no?" Avery's jaw tightened. His suspicion was baseless. He believed I leaked details of his business dealings to the press. I was loyal to him, always. The accusations wounded me. "And yet," Poirot said gently, "he dismissed you." Avery exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "Yes, 3 days ago, without evidence, without listening, it humiliated me. I begged him to reconsider, but he refused, and tonight—" His voice faltered. "Tonight, he is dead." Poirot studied him carefully. Anger and resentment swirled through Avery like a storm of his own, though not necessarily the murderous kind. "And where were you?" Poirot asked, "at the time of his death?" "In my quarters," Avery answered, "alone." "A difficult alibi to verify," Poirot murmured. Avery glared at him. "Yes, difficult," Avery snapped. but true. Poirot gave no indication whether he believed him. He turned next to the physician. "Dr. Hargreaves!" The doctor stepped forward, adjusting his spectacles, his breath shallow. "Yes, Monsieur Poirot." "You are the family doctor. You know the house, its routines, its people. Tell me, how did Lord Greycourt seem to you today?" Hargreaves swallowed. Troubled, stressed. He had been so for months. He complained of headaches, sleeplessness, and a constant sense of being watched. Some nights, he drank more than he should. Did he ever request sedatives? Yes, the doctor said, but mild ones, nothing lethal. Did you keep cyanide in your possession? Hargreaves started visibly. Cyanide? No, certainly not. I only handle such substances at the hospital, and even then rarely. Poirot raised an eyebrow. But you could obtain it. Hargreaves's face strained of colour. Perhaps, but I didn't. You must believe me. Poirot's moustache twitched slightly. He neither confirmed nor denied his belief. And you visited Lord Greycourt tonight. I came at 7:30, Hargreaves said. He asked to see me. He was distraught. He said he had something urgent to discuss, but when I arrived, he had changed his mind. He dismissed me. Dismissed you or argued with you? Hargreaves hesitated. We exchanged harsh words. Poirot nodded slowly. Then you left at 7:55, before the storm worsened. Did you return? No, Hargreaves insisted, though a tremor shook his hands. I went straight to my motor car. Poirot made a small note on a slip of paper. Thank you, Doctor. Clara shifted nervously on the chaise as Poirot turned toward her. Mademoiselle Clara, he began gently, you mentioned hearing voices in the study earlier, raised, distressed. Can you describe the second voice? Clara's breath hitched. She hugged her book tighter. I can try. It was deeper than father's, older, not Avery, not Samuel. Hargreaves cleared his throat pointedly. Clara frowned. No, not Dr. Hargreaves either. Someone else. I think someone he feared. Poirot leaned forward. Feared, mademoiselle. Clara nodded. Father rarely feared anything, but tonight, yes, he sounded wary. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And you? Did you speak to him afterward? No, she whispered. I went to the library. I heard thunder. The storm grew worse. Then I heard the scream. Poirot studied her face. A mixture of innocence and withheld truths. Then something shifted in the room. Samuel, standing near the wall with his hands clasped behind his back, seemed unusually tense. Poirot turned toward him. Samuel, he said, you heard voices in the parlour before the scream, did you not? The butler nodded reluctantly. I did, sir. You said the voices were raised. Yes, sir. Poirot moved closer, his gaze sharp. Did you recognize them? Samuel hesitated, glancing around the room as though afraid of the answer he held. Answer, please, Poirot prompted softly. Samuel exhaled. I believe one voice was Lord Greycourt's, the other, I cannot say with certainty. The storm distorted sounds. Poirot regarded him closely for a long moment. Samuel's face was carefully composed, yet something very subtle, betrayed strain. Very well, Poirot said calmly. He stepped into the centre of the room once more. Now, mes amis, there is a matter I must raise, one of importance. He lifted the second brandy glass, the one found hidden behind the mantel clock. The firelight reflected off its smooth surface like a warning glint. This glass, Poirot said, was concealed, hidden deliberately. All eyes locked onto the object. Why, Poirot continued, would someone hide a glass? No one spoke. He turned to Lady Evelyn. You shared no brandy with your husband? Never, she said quickly. I don't drink spirits. Poirot faced Avery. "You." Avery shook his head. "He dismissed me days ago. I wouldn't dare step foot in the parlour tonight." Poirot looked at the doctor. "Dr. Hargreaves?" "No, I did not drink with him," Hargreaves murmured. Poirot exhaled softly. "Then someone is lying." The storm boomed overhead, shaking the windows. Poirot's voice lowered into a razor-thin line of focus. "This hidden glass is the single most important object in this room. It reveals that Lord Greycourt met with someone tonight, intentionally or otherwise, and that person may have administered the poison." He turned to each face in turn. "One of you knows whose glass this is." Silence engulfed the room. Poirot let the silence linger, let it settle deep, crackling with accusation. At last, he placed the glass on the mantel. "We shall not rest until we uncover the truth of that meeting." He stepped back. "But for now, I have one final question for the evening," Poirot said. "Who among you," he asked, "possesses a cufflink engraved with the letter C?" A collective inhale swept the room. Avery straightened sharply. I have a pair. Gold, with a C inscribed upon them." Poirot's eyes glinted. "Ah, then you will be most interested to know, Monsieur Avery, that one of your cufflinks was discovered beneath the sofa, beside the body." Avery's mouth fell open in disbelief. I lost that weeks ago," he cried. "You must believe me." But Poirot did not reply. Instead, he slowly turned toward the fire and listened to the storm outside. The storm inside the manor was only just beginning. Chapter 3. Shadows in the storm. The storm intensified through the night, lashing the manor with sheets of silver rain that rendered the windows opaque. Each thunderclap reverberated across the sprawling estate, shaking the ancient timbers and stirring ghosts of the past. Within Greycourt Manor, silence stretched taut over everyone like an invisible shroud. The suspects dispersed after the initial interviews, but none dared retire to their rooms. Instead, they drifted through the hallways like restless spirits, each lost in their own fears and suspicions. Poirot, however, remained in the study, the room where death had claimed Lord Alistair Greycourt. The fire had dwindled to embers, glowing faintly among the ashes like dying eyes. The scent of brandy lingered in the air, mingling with the faint metallic undertone of poison. Poirot stood with his hands clasped behind his back, studying the room with the meticulous care of an artist examining his canvas. Every detail mattered. The arrangement of the furniture, the drape of the curtains, the placement of each glass, book, and pen. "Order and method," Poirot murmured to himself. "Always order and method." Lightning illuminated the study in a flash of white, momentarily revealing the room exactly as the victim had seen it in his final breaths. Poirot imagined Lord Greycourt sitting in the leather armchair, unaware of the doom creeping closer. Who had stood before him? What words had been exchanged? And what emotion, anger, fear, desperation, had pushed the killer across the threshold of murder? Poirot approached the mantel, where he had placed the concealed brandy glass earlier. It remained untouched. He observed it closely, as if expecting the glass itself to confess. A hidden glass means concealment, Poirot thought. Concealment means guilt or fear. He turned to the armchair. The right armrest bore faint scratches, likely made when the victim convulsed. The carpet beside the chair had been slightly disturbed, though not enough to suggest a struggle. Poirot knelt and examined the fibres. A few strands of fabric caught his attention. Pale blue wool. "A detail most curious," Poirot whispered. "Who among them wears blue wool?" He stood brushing dust from his knees and returned to the window. Outside, the storm raged on, trapping them all together in this house of secrets. No one could arrive or leave. And until morning, every hidden truth within these walls belonged to him alone. A knock echoed from the study door. "Enter," Poirot called. Samuel Croft, the butler, stepped inside with a silver tray in hand. A single lamp flickered behind him in the hallway. "Forgive the intrusion, sir," Samuel said. "I brought tea I thought you might require." Poirot raised a hand. "Merci, Samuel. Your concern is appreciated." Samuel set the tray upon the small table near the bookshelf. His movements were graceful, but Poirot noticed the tremor in his hands. "You are unsettled, mon ami," Poirot said gently. Samuel swallowed. "It is a difficult night, sir." Poirot studied him. "Tell me, Samuel, you served the Grey Courts for how many years?" 21, sir." "And in all that time have you known Lord Greycourt to receive guests late at night? Visitors of a discreet nature?" Samuel hesitated. "Occasionally, yes. He preferred privacy." "Privacy," Poirot repeated softly. "Or secrecy?" Samuel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I can only speak to what I observed, sir." Poirot nodded. "Very well. And what you observed tonight, was it also privacy?" Samuel opened his mouth, closed it, then finally sighed. "I heard the raised voices, but I could not distinguish words." "You hesitate again," Poirot said calmly. "You fear something or someone." Samuel's lips parted, but before he could answer, another knock sounded from the doorway. Clara Greycourt stood there, her face pale, her hair slightly damp from wandering too near the open windows. She looked younger in the dim firelight, almost childlike, but her eyes, those dark, observant eyes, held depths of unspoken worry. "Mr. Poirot," she said softly, "may I speak with you?" Poirot turned to Samuel. "That will be all for now." The butler nodded and left, closing the door behind him. Clara entered slowly, hugging her shawl around her shoulders. She stared at the armchair where her father had died, then quickly looked away. "Please," Poirot said gently, "sit." Clara perched on the edge of a low chair, trembling slightly. I remembered something that might matter." Poirot leaned forward. "Go on, mademoiselle." "When I heard father arguing earlier, I did not only hear raised voices," Clara said nervously. "I heard something else, a name." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "A name," Clara nodded, "but I do not know if I heard it clearly. The thunder, the wind. Tell me." She inhaled shakily. "It sounded like Cortez, or something similar." Poirot's mind raced. Cortez, a foreign name, unconnected to anyone in the household, but perhaps connected to Lord Greycourt's business affairs, his enemies, his debts. "You are certain?" he asked. "No," Clara whispered, "but I think father was afraid of them, whoever they were." Poirot sat back in thought. A shadowy figure with a foreign-sounding name. A secret late-night meeting. A hidden glass. "Is that all, mademoiselle?" Poirot asked softly. Clara hesitated again. "No, there is something else." Poirot waited. Clara twisted her hands in her lap. "Father and I argued yesterday. He told me he regretted something he had done, something terrible, and he said the past was catching up to him." Poirot's breath slowed. "Did he say what this past mistake was?" Clara shook her head. "He refused to tell me. But he seemed frightened, more frightened than I had ever seen him." Poirot nodded slowly. "Thank you, mademoiselle. You have been most helpful." Clara stood to leave, but paused at the door. "Mr. Poirot?" "Yes." "Do you think the person he feared is the same person who killed him?" Poirot's eyes narrowed. "It is possible." Clara shivered. "Then we are still in danger." She left without waiting for a response. Poirot returned to the fire, absorbing her words. Cortez, mistakes from the past, fear, and a daughter caught in the crossfire. Who was Lord Greycourt meeting tonight? Poirot's thoughts were interrupted by another knock. This one louder, sharper. Dr. Malcolm Hargreaves entered without waiting for permission, his raincoat draped over one arm, his face lined with exhaustion. "Poirot, a word." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "You seem distressed, Doctor." Hargreaves exhaled shakily. "I found something, outside, near the garden path." Poirot stood immediately. "Show me." The wind whipped fiercely as Poirot and Hargreaves stepped out the side door, lanterns in hand. Rain sprayed sideways, soaking their coats and stinging their faces. The garden path was a ribbon of mud, nearly washed away by the downpour. Hargreaves pointed toward a cluster of rose bushes, their branches thrashing violently. "There!" he shouted over the wind. Poirot crouched, holding the lantern close. Beneath the wet soil, half buried by storm water, lay a scrap of cloth, pale blue wool, torn, freshly torn. Poirot's mind snapped to the fabric on the carpet. "Mon Dieu!" he whispered. Hargreaves swallowed. "Do you recognize it?" Poirot straightened. "It matches what I found near the body." Hargreaves winced. "Poirot, I think someone tried to leave the manor tonight, or return to it." Poirot turned sharply. "Impossible! The storm, not impossible!" Hargreaves said grimly. "Very difficult, yes, but not impossible." Poirot's lantern illuminated footprints in the mud, uneven, staggered, leading toward the rear of the property. "Only one set," Poirot murmured. "Someone left alone." He looked at Hargreaves, and they were injured. Hargreaves swallowed again. "How can you tell?" Poirot pointed at the footprints. "See how they drag slightly on the left side? They limped." A limping intruder, or a limping murderer? Poirot turned toward the manor. "Come, Doctor, there is more to be learned inside." As they re-entered the manor, Poirot noticed a thin trail of damp footprints leading down the east corridor. Someone had returned soaked recently. Poirot followed the prints until they vanished into the Persian rug outside the billiard room. He pushed the door open. Avery sat inside, staring blankly at a glass of water. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, revealing a bruise on his forearm. Fresh, dark, unmistakable. Poirot stepped forward. "Monsieur Avery." Avery jerked upright. "Poirot! I didn't expect— You have been outside," Poirot said calmly. Avery's eyes widened. "What? No, I've been here." Poirot gestured to the bruise. "You are injured." "It's nothing," Avery muttered. "I slipped earlier on the stairs." Poirot's gaze hardened. "You are lying, monsieur." Avery stood abruptly, knocking his chair back. "I'm not. I swear it." Poirot took another step. "Then why does your sleeve bear fibres of pale blue wool? Wool identical to the cloth found outside? Wool identical to the threads on the carpet beside Lord Greycourt's chair?" Avery froze. His breathing grew quick and ragged. I can explain," he stammered. Poirot's eyes sharpened like blades. "Then I suggest you do so, monsieur, for the hour grows late, and your explanations will soon be the only thing standing between you and the gallows." Avery's shoulders slumped. He sank onto the nearest chair. His voice trembled. "All right," he whispered. "I'll tell you everything." Poirot stepped forward. "Then, Monsieur Avery, begin." The storm roared beyond the windows as the truth, one truth among many, prepared to surface. Chapter 4. Avery's Confession. Thunder rumbled through Greycourt Manor as Poirot closed the billiard-room door behind him, shutting out the distant murmurs of the restless household. Avery sat hunched at the far end of the room, elbows on his knees, fingers pressed so tightly against his temples that the knuckles blanched white. A single lamp burned on the side table, casting long shadows across the green felt of the billiard table and giving the room an eerie subterranean glow. Poirot approached slowly, hands folded neatly before him. "Monsieur Avery," he said softly, "it is time for clarity. The truth, if you please." Avery lifted his head. His eyes were red-rimmed, but not from tears. More from exhaustion, fear, and some secret war raging inside him. He drew a shaky breath. "I didn't kill him, Poirot," Avery said immediately. "But I was outside tonight. I won't deny it." Poirot nodded once. "Then start there. Why?" Avery ran a trembling hand through his hair. "Because someone left a message for me, slipped under my door before dinner." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "A message?" Avery reached into his breast pocket and produced a small crumpled paper. Poirot unfolded it. "Meet me at the old greenhouse. Midnight. Come alone if you value your future." No signature, no context, only the faint scent of damp soil clinging to the page. "Très intéressant," Poirot murmured. "And you obeyed?" Avery swallowed hard. I had to. You don't understand, Poirot. Lord Greycourt, he had leverage over me. Financial leverage. I owe him far more than I could repay. I thought—" He shut his eyes. "I thought someone was offering to help, or threatening something worse." Poirot watched him closely. "And what did you find at the greenhouse?" "Nothing," Avery whispered. "No one came. I waited nearly 20 minutes before the storm became unbearable. As I was leaving, I stumbled in the mud. That's how I tore my coat. That's all." Poirot's expression didn't change, but his voice grew firm. "And what about the bruise on your arm, monsieur?" Avery hesitated only a fraction too long. "I slipped, as I told you." Poirot circled him slowly, like a scholar studying a rare specimen. "And yet you returned to the manor soaked, covered in mud, and with fabric torn suspiciously close to the time of the murder." Avery's jaw tightened. "I didn't see anyone. I swear it." Poirot stopped behind him. "Then someone watched you." Avery shivered visibly. Poirot resumed speaking, voice calm, measured, unforgiving. "You spoke earlier of financial debts. Tell me, how much did you owe Lord Greycourt?" Avery exhaled shakily. "Enough that he owned me, in a way. He bailed me out of a ruinous investment years ago. Ever since, he kept me close, too close. I did things for him, ugly things, just to keep him satisfied." Poirot exchanged no reaction. "Illegal things, monsieur?" Avery closed his eyes, shame flickering across his features. "Yes." Poirot nodded slowly. "And tonight he summoned you?" "No," Avery whispered. "Tonight someone else did. Someone who knew about my debts." Lightning split the sky, briefly illuminating Avery's fearful expression. Poirot leaned forward slightly. "And tell me, did Lord Greycourt ever mention the name Cortez?" Avery blinked. "Cortez? No. Should he have?" Poirot did not answer. Instead, he folded the note and slipped it into his pocket. "Monsieur Avery, you have lied by omission, yet you have revealed enough to keep me intrigued." Poirot straightened. "But one question remains." Avery met his eyes reluctantly. Poirot's voice fell to a razor whisper. "Why did you not mention this meeting earlier?" Avery's breath hitched. "Because I was afraid you would think that you killed him," Poirot finished. Avery nodded helplessly. Poirot studied him a moment longer, then turned toward the door. "Fear makes men foolish, monsieur, but it does not necessarily make them guilty." He reached the door but paused. Avery's voice cracked behind him. "Poirot!" Poirot glanced back, What if whoever sent that note also killed Alistair? Avery whispered. What if they were watching me, waiting for me to leave the house? Poirot's grey eyes gleamed like steel. Eh bien, if that is the case, then the killer is far more cunning than I suspected. Poirot left the billiard room and stepped into the dimly lit corridor. The wind groaned through the old beams overhead like a grieving spirit. Shadows pooled at the base of the staircase, stretching long and thin like dark fingers reaching across the floor. Poirot walked with purpose toward the study, his mind arranging facts like pieces on a chessboard. A secret midnight meeting. A man in financial bondage. A note from an unknown hand. A foreign-sounding name spoken in fear. A torn scrap of blue wool near the body. A limping intruder. And one truth above all. Someone inside this house was playing two games. One with Lord Greycourt, and one with those who feared him. Poirot reached the study and stepped inside, closing the door softly behind him. The embers in the fireplace had nearly died. He stirred them with the poker until they glowed. Then, as the orange light flickered back to life, he noticed something he had somehow overlooked. A thin, wet footprint on the carpet, but smaller than Avery's, much smaller, almost dainty. Poirot's eyes narrowed. A woman's footprint. He knelt, touching the damp fibres. Mademoiselle Clara, he murmured, or perhaps someone else. The print pointed not toward the door, but deeper into the study, toward the curtained alcove behind the bookshelf. Poirot stood slowly. Lightning flashed. A shadow moved behind the curtain. Poirot's breath tightened. "Who is there?" he demanded. Silence. Then a whisper. A voice he recognized. Female. Unsteady. "Please, don't come any closer." Poirot froze. For hidden behind the curtain, trembling and soaked from the storm, was Lady Beatrice Greycourt. And in her shaking hand, clutched tight against her chest, was Lord Alistair's missing pocket watch. Chapter 5. The pocket watch and the widow, approximately 1,000 words. Lady Beatrice stood motionless behind the heavy curtain, her pale face emerging slowly from the shadows as Poirot edged closer. Her gown, once immaculate, clung to her like damp parchment. Droplets from her rain-soaked hair slid down her cheeks like ghostly tears. The golden pocket watch she held trembled visibly in her grasp. "Madame," Poirot said gently, his tone a mixture of concern and suspicion, "you are far from your rooms at such an hour." Beatrice swallowed. I saw the light under the door. I did not mean to intrude." Poirot's eyes flickered to the watch. "You clutch that object as though it were the last anchor keeping you from drowning." "Why?" She looked down at it as if noticing it for the first time. Because he always carried it, always." Her voice cracked. "And now it is stained with his blood." Poirot stepped closer, but not too close. He sensed her fragility, her fear. "Where did you find it?" Beatrice's fingers tightened. "In the rose garden, by the old fountain. It must have fallen during whatever happened." Poirot's eyebrows lifted. "Curious. For the body was discovered in the study, not in the garden." Beatrice flinched, as though struck. Poirot continued softly. "Madame, did your husband meet someone outside before his death?" She hesitated. A dangerous pause. Poirot watched her eyes. Not the tears, but the thoughts racing behind them. "Yes," she whispered finally. "He did. They argued. I heard it from my upstairs window. Their voices carried through the storm." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Whose voice, madame?" Beatrice shook her head. I could not see, only hear." She touched the watch again. "But after the shouting stopped, I saw a figure running back toward the house." "Injured?" Poirot asked, limping. Beatrice's breath hitched. Yes. Poirot concealed his reaction, though his mind churned. The limping intruder, the torn blue wool, the missing watch. Beatrice drew closer, lowering her voice. Monsieur Poirot, Alistair was not the man everyone believed him to be. You must understand that. Poirot met her eyes. Madame, I understand very well. Your husband had many secrets, and some of those secrets frightened him. Her lips trembled. He ruined people quietly, efficiently, especially those who defied him. I tried to leave once, years ago. He dissuaded me. Poirot's face did not change, but the firelight caught a flash of sadness in his eyes. Madame, I am sorry. Beatrice shook her head fiercely. Do not pity me. Instead, understand this. Alistair had enemies, both within this manor and far beyond it. But whoever killed him... Her voice dropped to a whisper. They were desperate. Desperate enough to take something from his body. Poirot gestured at the watch. This? She nodded. Inside it is a hidden compartment, a message, or a name. Poirot stiffened. You opened it? I tried, she said, twisting a trembling hand around the golden casing, but the mechanism is jammed. Poirot extended his palm. May I? She hesitated, then slowly placed the watch into his hand. Poirot felt its weight, literal and symbolic. He studied the design, tracing the filigree with nimble fingers until he found the faint seam along the side. With gentle pressure, he nudged the catch. It refused to open. Poirot frowned. The watch has sustained damage. From the fall, Beatrice whispered. Perhaps. Poirot held it closer to the lamplight. Or perhaps it was forced shut to hide something. A sound came from the hallway, the creak of a floorboard, soft but unmistakable. Poirot's head snapped up. Beatrice stiffened. Someone was listening. Poirot stepped quickly to the door and flung it open. The hallway was empty, but not silent. For faintly, very faintly, Poirot heard footsteps retreating toward the west wing. He returned to Beatrice, voice calm but firm. Madame, you must tell me one more thing. When you saw the figure run toward the house, from which direction did they come? Beatrice closed her eyes, replaying the memory like a tortured reel of film. The greenhouse, she whispered. They came from the greenhouse path. Poirot's expression hardened. Then they were following Monsieur Avery. She gasped. Avery? But he would never... I do not say he killed your husband, but someone shadowed him tonight. Poirot tapped the watch thoughtfully. And perhaps they went to the garden after to retrieve this. Beatrice suddenly grabbed his sleeve, panic surging in her eyes. Poirot! Whoever is doing this, they are still here, in this house, watching us. Poirot placed a reassuring hand over hers. Oui, madame. That, I suspect, is entirely true. She let go slowly, her shoulders trembling not with fear now, but exhaustion. Poirot took a step back. Return to your room, madame. Lock your door. Do not speak with anyone until I summon you. Beatrice hesitated, then nodded and slipped from the study, her footsteps fading into the corridor. Poirot turned his attention once more to the pocket watch. A secret hidden within. A motive wrapped in gold. He brought it near the firelight, twisting the dial once more. A soft click echoed. His eyes widened. The compartment sprang open. Inside was a thin, folded slip of paper. Poirot carefully removed it. And upon the paper, written in hurried, jagged ink, was a single name, Cortez. Poirot's pulse quickened. Before he could process the implications, the study door slammed open. Samuel Croft, the butler, stood in the doorway, panting, soaked, and deathly pale. "Mr. Poirot!" he gasped. "You must come at once!" Poirot rose instantly, What has happened?" Samuel's voice trembled with horror. "It's Miss Clara, sir. She's vanished." Chapter 6. The Ticking Lies. The atmosphere within Hawthorne Manor had shifted, as if the walls themselves sensed the tightening noose of Poirot's inquiry. A hush had fallen over the corridors. Even the servants walked softer, speaking in whispers, casting furtive glances toward the great Belgian detective, who now presided over the estate like a judge preparing to pronounce verdict. Outside, dusk gathered fast, draping the manor in violet gloom as the wind combed through the tall hedges with a restless sigh. Inside, however, another kind of storm brewed, one made of fear, secrets, and the unmistakable dread of being discovered. Poirot, seated in the drawing-room with a fire glowing gently beside him, summoned Amelia Hawthorne first. She entered like a ghost, still beautiful, still stately, yet trembling ever so slightly. Her gloved hands twisted around one another, fingers pale and tense. Poirot gestured toward the chair opposite him. "Please, mademoiselle," he said softly, "sit. We speak only to understand." She lowered herself onto the seat, though her chin lifted in the proud Hawthorne fashion. "You believe I had something to do with my uncle's death," she murmured. "I believe," Poirot replied, "that every member of this household is capable of much more than they admit, including you." Her eyes flashed. Hurt or anger, he could not yet tell. But when he questioned her about her visit to the parlour that night, and the missing hour she still could not account for, her composure began to fracture. Her voice wavered, her gaze drifted, yet every time Poirot pressed closer, she returned to one unwavering refrain. "I did not kill him." Poirot observed her closely. The tightening of the jaw, the too rapid blink of the eyelashes, the slight tremble in her right hand. A woman caught between truth and danger, but not necessarily guilty. As Amelia departed, Poirot was struck by a sense of urgency. His famed little grey cells stirred with a new energy. Someone was pushing against time, and the ticking grew louder. Next came Dr. Lionel Graves. He entered briskly, a scent of disinfectant trailing him, his spectacles gleaming sharply in the firelight. He folded his hands behind his back, standing rather than sitting. "I assume this is about the toxicology report you asked me to expedite," he said. "Partly," Poirot replied, "but also about your curious relationship with the victim." Graves blinked once, slowly. "Curious?" "Oui," Poirot murmured. "A doctor who despised his patient, a patient who threatened to expose his doctor. Such things do not lead to peaceful coexistence." Graves stiffened. His mask of professional indifference, so carefully crafted, slipped for a moment. "You believe I poisoned him?" "I believe you had knowledge," Poirot said gently. "Knowledge of what could kill a man without leaving immediate trace. That is not the same as guilt, but it is what you English call awkward, n'est-ce pas?" Graves exhaled sharply and sat down at last. His confession was not about the murder, but about the financial blackmail Sir Reginald had levied against him for years. The result of a youthful medical mishap Graves had spent half his career trying to bury. There was bitterness in his tone, but not venom. Resentment, perhaps, but not the flavour of murder. Poirot dismissed him politely, yet with eyes that studied every step he took. The third interrogation brought the most tension. Captain Julian Mercer strode in with military precision, chin high, shoulders squared, boots clicking sharply against the parquet. His uniform-like attire made him appear almost larger than life against the ornate furnishings of the manor. "You wanted to see me, Monsieur Poirot?" he said, as though reporting for duty. Poirot steepled his fingers. You, monsieur, were the Guignol, last person seen in the corridor before the victim collapsed. You claim you heard nothing unusual. That is perplexing. I told you already, Mercer replied in clipped tones. I went to fetch a decanter from the study. I passed the parlour, yes, but nothing seemed amiss. Poirot leaned forward. And yet, Captain, the maid heard raised voices from the parlour. Voices that she described as sharp, like men arguing. You say you heard nothing? A muscle twitched along Mercer's jawline. Poirot continued softly, You served in the war. Your hearing, surely it is not so poor that raised voices escape you. Mercer flinched, just faintly. Poirot saw it. And then Mercer's mask fell into place again. You're implying I fought with Sir Reginald. I didn't, but you did owe him money, Poirot said simply. Mercer froze. The silence thickened. It was not money, he said at last. It was honour, something he threatened to ruin. He said no more, but his knuckles whitened on the chair arms. Poirot knew he was on a delicate edge, too delicate to push without breaking the man entirely. The fourth questioning was reserved for Lady Evelyn Hawthorne. She entered with measured grace, but there was an unusual sharpness in her gaze. Her morning attire was immaculate, not a strand of hair out of place. Yet there was something brittle about her calm, as though emotion simmered behind a facade of aristocratic restraint. Poirot offered condolences. I grieve deeply, she said quietly, but my grief is my own. What do you need from me, monsieur? Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly. Your relationship with your husband was complicated, no? Her lips tightened. Is any marriage simple? He asked about the sleeping draught she administered nightly, about the tensions noted by the servants, about the locked drawer that once contained certain documents Sir Reginald was rumoured to be hiding. Lady Evelyn answered with poise, but there were gaps, too many. When Poirot asked where she was during the exact moment of her husband's poisoning, she paused for half a heartbeat too long. A heartbeat that matters. Poirot let her go with a polite bow. But she had not fooled him. Finally, Poirot sat alone by the fire, the glow casting a warm aura over his thoughtful expression. Every testimony, every hesitation, every tremble now arranged itself like rows of chess pieces before his methodical mind. He retrieved the small silver pocket watch, found earlier, engraved with initials. He held it to his ear. There was the faintest ticking. Poirot smiled, though it was a grim smile, for he now knew the watch had been tampered with. And whoever tampered with the watch was the same person who tampered with Sir Reginald's life. Outside, thunder grumbled across the horizon. Inside, the truth was beginning to take shape, sharp, dangerous, and ready to strike. Chapter 7. The Watchmaker's Secret. The storm that had been whispering against the horizon finally broke over Hawthorne Manor, hammering the windows with sheets of cold rain and rattling the shutters. Lightning flashed across the grounds, illuminating the gardens in brief, ghostly strokes. Inside, however, Hercule Poirot sat in perfect stillness at the small writing desk in the library. The silver pocket watch open before him like a confession waiting to be heard. A flame from a nearby lamp glinted across the tiny gears exposed within its casing, casting delicate shadows that seemed almost alive. Each component of the watch had a story to tell, but one detail sang louder than the rest. Inside the back plate was a thin smear of something pale, granular. Poirot touched it gently with a gloved finger, then brought it close. His eyes narrowed. A trace of a powder, far too fine to be mere dust. A residue, he thought, that should not be present in a gentleman's watch. Especially not a watch belonging to a recently poisoned man. Poirot rose and paced, his mind a whirring mechanism as precise as the timepiece he examined. The poison, he murmured to himself, was delivered in a manner most clever, yet also most desperate. He recalled Sir Reginald's last moments, clutching his chest, fumbling for his watch, as if it were some final comfort. And now here lay evidence that the watch itself had been tampered with. The murderer had not only introduced poison, but had woven it into the fabric of Sir Reginald's daily habit. Poirot knew the type of lethal substance that could pass through the skin unnoticed, absorbing silently, efficiently. A toxin that could be activated by touch. It was ingenious. But it also meant the killer understood chemistry, or at least had access to specialized compounds. The number of suspects capable of such knowledge had now shrunk to a precariously small circle. Yet Poirot was troubled, not by the complexity of the method, but by something far subtler, something emotional. Motive, in this case, was not purely pragmatic. As he returned to the watch, he observed the inside of the case more closely. A fine scratch near the hinge, fresh, deliberate, likely made in haste. A person familiar with watchmaking would leave no such trace. But someone unfamiliar, someone anxious, perhaps trembling, might. Thus the killer was not a cold practitioner. No, this was someone acting out of pressure, of fear, of desperation. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Poirot glanced up. "Entrez!" he called. The door eased open, and Amelia Hawthorne stepped inside, drenched in the faint silver glow of the storm-lit window. She clutched a shawl about her shoulders, eyes glistening with conflicted emotion. "Monsieur Poirot," she whispered, I needed to see you. It cannot wait." Poirot gestured for her to sit. She approached hesitantly. Like someone approaching a precipice she was no longer certain she could step away from. She took a breath. "You asked earlier where I was the night my uncle died. I told you I could not remember all of it. That was not the full truth." Poirot inclined his head gently. "Go on, mademoiselle." Her voice quivered. "I saw someone in the corridor that night. Someone I should have mentioned before, but I was afraid of what it would mean." Poirot leaned forward, the lamp's glow softening his silhouette. "You feared to implicate someone you care for." Amelia looked away, guilt twisting her expression. "Yes, and who was this person?" Poirot asked softly, though the weight of the question settled heavily between them. "Captain Mercer," she said, barely audible. "He was near the parlor door, closer than he claimed. When he saw me, he startled, as though he'd been caught doing something he shouldn't." Poirot absorbed her confession with grave calm. "Why tell me now?" "Because," she whispered, "you are closing in on the truth, and if hiding what I saw makes me complicit in murder, I cannot bear it." Before Poirot could respond, another knock sounded, sharp, urgent. The door opened without waiting for permission, and Dr. Lionel Graves entered, rain dripping from his hat and coat. "Poirot," he said, breathless, "I've rechecked the toxicology. The substance used, it confirms your suspicion. Skin-absorbent, rare, difficult to procure." Poirot nodded slowly. "And you, Dr. Graves, would know who among this household has the means to obtain such a compound?" Dr. Graves hesitated. His eyes flicked toward Amelia, then back to Poirot. "Yes," he murmured, "but that is not why I came. I found something else." He reached into his coat and withdrew a small envelope, damp at the edges but still sealed, This was placed anonymously in my medical bag. I discovered it moments ago." Poirot took the envelope, sensing the tension radiating from both of his visitors. Inside was a single piece of paper, scrawled with only 4 chilling words. "You are too late." Lightning cracked violently outside, illuminating Amelia's pale face and Dr. Graves's grim expression. Poirot stood and closed the watch gently, slipping it into his pocket. "This," he said softly, "is not merely a warning. It is a declaration." Amelia swallowed. "What does it mean, Monsieur Poirot?" Poirot's eyes glimmered with a dark certainty. "It means," he said, "that the murderer believes the game is already won. And that, mes amis, is when the killer becomes most dangerous." The manor trembled under the thunder's roar. Somewhere deep within its halls, a floorboard creaked, slow, deliberate, like a footstep hiding in the dark. Poirot turned toward the door. Chapter 8. A shadow in the corridors. The storm raged long into the night, but within Hawthorne Manor a deeper tempest brewed. Silent, watchful, electric with dread. The corridors, dimly lit by flickering sconces, seemed to stretch endlessly into darkness. The air carried this breathless tension, as if the manor itself were holding still, listening for footsteps that dared to disturb its gloom. Poirot sensed it. A subtle shift in atmosphere, the unmistakable presence of someone moving with purpose but without wish to be seen. He emerged from the library with the silver watch in his pocket and the ominous message still weighing on his mind. Dr. Graves and Amelia trailed behind him, their expressions marked by fear and curiosity in equal measure. The hall felt colder than usual, the shadows longer. Somewhere, a clock chimed the hour, its tolling echoing through the estate like a grim reminder that time was narrowing. Poirot paused at the foot of the grand staircase. "The murderer," he said softly, "has grown bold. Such confidence is not born from safety, but from desperation. They know that discovery edges closer." Amelia shivered. Dr. Graves ran a weary hand across his brow. "Do you think Captain Mercer sent the message?" he asked. Poirot shook his head. "Non, docteur. Captain Mercer is a man of passion, not subterfuge. This warning comes from someone who believes themselves the strategist." His gaze drifted upward, to the dim landing above, where darkness pooled like ink. Lightning slashed across the windows, briefly illuminating the corridor, revealing, for the tiniest heartbeat, the outline of a figure at the far end of the upper hall. Amelia gasped. Dr. Graves froze. Poirot narrowed his eyes, but the figure vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Without hesitation, Poirot began to ascend the staircase. His steps were soft yet deliberate, and as he reached the landing, he motioned for the others to remain behind. He moved with slow precision along the upper hall, pausing before each closed door, listening for the whisper of movement or breath. The storm outside was deafening, but Poirot had spent his life learning to hear what others overlooked. Halfway down the hall, he stopped before Sir Reginald's study. The door was ajar, though it had been shut earlier. Poirot's fingertips lightly touched the handle. A faint draught breathed through the crack, carrying with it the scent of something metallic and cold. He eased the door open. The room was nearly dark save for the intermittent flashes of lightning that filtered through the tall windows. Papers lay scattered across the desk as if someone had rifled through them in haste. A single drawer hung open, emptied. And on the carpet, faint but unmistakable, lay a trail of small pale granules. Poirot crouched. "The same powder," he murmured, "from the watch." The murderer had returned to the scene of the crime, either to retrieve something they had forgotten, or to destroy something they feared Poirot would find. Behind him, Amelia's voice called softly from the corridor, "Monsieur Poirot, are you well?" He rose slowly, turning toward the open doorway. "Stay where you are, mademoiselle. This room is not yet finished telling its story." Dr. Graves appeared beside her, breathing hard. "There's movement downstairs," he whispered urgently. "Someone was seen crossing the east wing." Poirot's eyes sharpened. The manor seemed suddenly alive with shifting shapes. The killer, cornered, was navigating the house in frantic circles. Poirot stepped out of the study. "We must divide our search," he said. "The murderer counts on confusion. We give them clarity instead." He pointed decisively. "Dr. Graves, check the conservatory. Amelia, remain near the staircase where it is safest. I will search the east wing." Amelia protested. "Monsieur Poirot, please, you can't go alone." "Courage, mademoiselle," he said gently. "It is not bravery that guides me, but necessity." He moved down the long hallway, his silhouette framed by the erratic bursts of lightning. The east wing was older than the rest of the manor, its wooden panels creaking with age, its wallpaper faded to sepia shadows. The air grew cooler, thicker. Poirot followed the faint sound of muffled steps, light, hurried, determined. A door at the end of the hall was slightly open, revealing a sliver of pale blue carpet. Poirot pushed gently. Inside was the unused guest room, but the curtains swayed unnaturally, stirred by a breeze that should not exist. Poirot froze. A window had been opened. He approached it slowly, peering through the gap into the rain-lashed darkness outside. The ivy-covered trellis below the window trembled. Someone had climbed down only moments earlier. "A daring escape," Poirot murmured, "but not a complete one." For on the windowsill lay a torn scrap of dark fabric, caught on a jagged splinter of wood. Poirot plucked it free, examining it in the dim light. The weave was fine, bespoke, unmistakably expensive. And more tellingly, it bore a faint scent of cologne, a cologne he recognized. He closed his fingers around the cloth just as thunder ripped through the sky. The manor groaned under the force of the wind, and in the distant hall a door slammed violently, echoing like a gunshot. Poirot turned, the cloth fragment clenched in his fist. "Now," he whispered, "the shadow begins to show its shape." He moved swiftly back toward the main corridor, his pace quickening with certainty. The killer was running out of places to hide. And in the frantic haste of their escape, they had made their first true mistake. For the fabric, the scent, the window, the pattern was forming. And Poirot, master of patterns, had just seen the first clear lines of the truth. Chapter 9. The gathering storm of truth. The manor was no longer merely a house. It was a living labyrinth of fear, shadows, and secrets clawing to the surface. The storm outside intensified, rain lashing at the windows as though the night itself demanded revelation. Poirot moved through the dim corridor with long, purposeful strides, the fragment of dark fabric clenched between his fingers like a talisman of truth. Every step echoed with the weight of a dawning certainty. He reached the landing to find Amelia waiting, pale and tense. The flickering sconces cast trembling shadows across her face. "Did you find anything?" she whispered. Poirot lifted the scrap of cloth. "Oui, mademoiselle, something most telling." Her eyes widened. "What does it mean?" "That," he said gently, "is what I must soon confirm." Before she could question further, hurried footsteps approached. Dr. Graves appeared from the lower hall, soaked with perspiration and agitation. "Poirot! The conservatory was empty, but someone has definitely been through there. The glass door was unlatched, and I found this." He held out a small silver vial. Poirot took it carefully, examining the slender metal container. "A vial for chemical tinctures," he murmured. "Empty, of course." Graves nodded. "I found it beneath the potting table. It looks recently dropped." Poirot's expression tightened. "Then our murderer grows careless indeed." At that moment, a new voice cut through the tense silence. "I suppose you're eager to place blame somewhere, Poirot." Captain Julian Mercer stood at the foot of the stairs, rain dripping from his coat. His normally rigid posture was loosened, his eyes shadowed with fatigue and something akin to resignation. He climbed the steps slowly, each footfall deliberate, almost ceremonial. Amelia stiffened. Graves stepped beside her. The storm howled. Poirot appraised the captain with calm scrutiny. "You have been absent for some time, Captain Mercer." "I was outside," Mercer replied, "searching the grounds. I saw someone near the stables, but they disappeared into the storm." He glanced at the scrap of fabric in Poirot's hand. "I see you found something." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "You wear a coat of this very fabric, do you not, Captain?" Mercer's jaw clenched. He reached for his sleeve, and there it was. A tear, small but unmistakable, matching the exact place where a piece of cloth would have caught on a window's splintering edge. Amelia gasped. Dr. Graves's face drained of colour. Mercer raised both hands. "I can explain." Poirot stepped forward, voice soft but implacable. "Explain, then, why you fled from the window in the east wing. Explain why your coat bears the wound of your escape." Mercer exhaled shakily. For the first time, his military composure cracked, not in anger, but in exhaustion. "Very well," he said, "but I warn you, Poirot. The truth is not what you think." He sank onto the nearest chair, rainwater pooling beneath him. "Yes, I was in the East Wing. I was following someone I believed responsible for Sir Reginald's death." Amelia blinked in disbelief. "You were following someone?" Mercer nodded. "Lady Evelyn?" A stunned silence swallowed the corridor. Poirot folded his arms. "Why did you suspect her?" Mercer's face darkened. "Because I overheard her arguing with Sir Reginald the night he died. Her voice was sharp, angrier than I had ever heard it. He was threatening her with something serious." Amelia turned pale. "Her reputation?" "No," Mercer replied gravely. "Her inheritance. He intended to cut her out completely. She begged him not to, but he was merciless." Poirot absorbed this quietly, yet his eyes gleamed with a deeper understanding forming beneath the surface. "So," Poirot said, "you followed her tonight?" "Yes. When I saw her slip into the East Wing, I followed, but she vanished. I reached the guest room only moments before you, Poirot. I heard you enter the study. I realized I could not be found lurking in the halls like a criminal, so I used the trellis to escape." Graves scoffed. "You expect us to believe this? Convenient timing for a confession." But Poirot held up a hand. "Dr. Graves, let the man finish," Mercer continued. "I returned through the garden, hoping to re-enter discreetly. I swear to you all, I had nothing to do with Sir Reginald's death. I only feared the truth would implicate me." Amelia looked torn, her hands trembling at her sides. Graves looked sceptical. The storm raged harder. Poirot stepped closer to Mercer, peering into his eyes with piercing intensity. "Captain, your story explains the cloth, the window, your absence, but one thing remains." He lifted the silver watch. "Did you tamper with this?" Mercer shook his head vehemently. "I've never seen that watch in my life." Poirot studied him for several long seconds. Then he turned away, pacing slowly through the hall as a deeper layer of thought began to crystallize. He addressed the group without turning back. Mes amis, we stand upon the edge of revelation. But before we proceed, we must ask ourselves one question, a question most vital. The thunder boomed. Lightning flared. What, Poirot said, his voice low and deliberate, is the one thing each suspect feared most from Sir Reginald Hawthorne? Amelia swallowed. Graves looked away. Mercer tensed. Poirot turned toward them at last, eyes blazing. And more importantly, which fear was worth a man's life? The hall fell into breathless silence as the storm battered the manor's walls, each strike echoing like a heartbeat counting down. The truth was no longer hiding. It was circling them. Narrowing waiting. Chapter 10. The Final Revelation. The storm had finally begun to relent, leaving Hawthorne Manor drenched in a cold, silvery mist. Inside, the atmosphere was taut with anticipation, as if the house itself were holding its breath. Poirot stood in the centre of the grand drawing-room. The silver pocket watch now securely in his hand, its secrets exposed, its ticking silent in the stillness. The suspects had been gathered. Amelia, Dr. Graves, Captain Mercer, and Lady Evelyn, all standing at calculated distances, their faces pale, eyes wide, each wondering who would be accused, who would be condemned. Poirot cleared his throat, drawing the attention of all present. Mes amis, he began, tonight we untangle the web that has ensnared this household. The threads of deceit, fear, and desperation are now visible. It is no longer enough to guess. The time for truth has arrived. He gestured to the pocket watch. This watch was not merely a timekeeper. It was a vessel of deception. The poison that ended Sir Reginald's life was absorbed through contact with the watch, a substance rare and expertly crafted to act slowly, leaving no immediate sign. He turned his gaze toward Dr. Graves. The toxin's composition is known to you, yes? Graves swallowed, his face pale. Yes, I can identify it, but I did not administer it, I assure you. Poirot inclined his head. Indeed, you had knowledge, but knowledge does not equate to guilt. He walked slowly around the room, eyes flicking to each suspect in turn. Let us consider motive. Sir Reginald had many enemies, yes, but only one feared exposure in a manner that would destroy reputation, fortune, and freedom simultaneously. Only one had the knowledge, the access, and the desperation to act tonight. He paused, letting the weight of the words sink in. Amelia clutched her shawl tightly. Captain Mercer's hands twitched. Lady Evelyn's lips were pressed into a thin line, eyes defiant yet haunted. Poirot smiled slightly, though there was no warmth in it, only the razor-sharp precision of his deduction. The key, Poirot continued, lies in human nature. The murderer was meticulous, patient, and cunning, yet their fear betrayed them. Fear always leaves a mark. He held up the fragment of dark fabric. This, left behind in the east wing window, and the scent that accompanied it, cologne of the highest quality, pointed directly to one person, not a man but a woman. A lady of elegance, accustomed to control, yet desperate in this moment. All eyes shifted to Lady Evelyn. She straightened herself, lifting her chin. "You think me a murderer?" she demanded, voice icy. Poirot shook his head. "I think you are clever, but cleverness alone does not excuse recklessness. You sought to control Sir Reginald, to protect your inheritance. You feared the consequences of exposure, and you acted out of desperation, not malice." Lady Evelyn's composure faltered. "You are mistaken," she said, though the words lacked conviction. Poirot's gaze softened. "Perhaps, but consider the events of tonight. The greenhouse, the notes, the pocket watch tampered with, all orchestrated by someone who understood fear intimately. Someone who believed they could manipulate the others, yet underestimated the sharpness of little grey cells." He gestured to Amelia. Mademoiselle Amelia witnessed movement, heard voices, and saw the figure fleeing. Captain Mercer followed. Yes, but only to protect. And observe, not to harm. Captain Mercer stepped forward. Poirot is correct. I did not touch Sir Reginald. I only pursued the truth when I saw the opportunity. Poirot nodded approvingly. Exactly, monsieur. And Dr. Graves? Your knowledge was necessary but incidental. You were not the hand that delivered the poison, merely the one capable of identifying it after the fact. The question remains, who then used this knowledge to commit murder? The room was silent. Poirot walked to Lady Evelyn, close enough that all could see her reaction. Madame, the motive was clear. You acted because of fear, not vengeance. The method, ingenious, slow-acting and silent, reflects a mind both educated and desperate. The poison was applied to the watch, the instrument your husband carried, and thus you ensured he would meet his end in a familiar, trusted way. Lady Evelyn's face paled. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. Poirot continued. The final evidence, mes amis, was left in haste. The fabric caught on the window trellis, the cologne betrayed you, and the powder residue in the watch could not be removed without meticulous care that you lacked in your panic. He paused, letting the truth resonate. The moment you realized Sir Reginald's life was in your hands, the tension of fear became action. But action leaves traces. Lady Evelyn's hands trembled, and she finally whispered, It was not meant to kill him, only to frighten, to stop him from exposing me. Poirot nodded. Yet fear, when executed with such a method, can be fatal, and in this case it was. Your hand delivered the substance, your intention was survival, and your recklessness led to death. Amelia's eyes filled with tears. All this for inheritance, for fear? Poirot regarded her solemnly. Fear is a powerful motivator. It is what drives humans to act against their own morality. Tonight, fear was both the motive and the method. Poirot then turned to the gathered group, voice calm but absolute. The case is closed. Lady Evelyn will be taken into custody. Captain Mercer acted honourably. Dr. Graves was merely knowledgeable, and Mademoiselle Amelia is a witness, not a participant. The storm outside began to abate, rain turning to a gentle drizzle. The manor seemed to exhale, releasing the tension that had held it captive for so many hours. Outside, lightning flickered only briefly, no longer threatening. Inside, however, the consequences of human fear and frailty remained, etched in faces and whispered conversations. Lady Evelyn stood silently, tears running freely now, the full weight of her actions pressing upon her. Poirot placed the silver pocket watch back on the desk, a symbol of the intricate weave of fate, fear and folly that had led to the tragedy. Poirot spoke softly, almost to himself. The mind of man is complex. When combined with fear, greed and desperation, even a simple object, a watch, a note, a fragment of cloth, can become the instrument of death. And yet justice, however slow, finds its path. The gathering dispersed quietly, each person carrying the memory of a night that had changed everything. Poirot remained in the drawing room, staring at the watch, reflecting on the subtle interplay of human nature and circumstance. Though the storm had passed, its lessons lingered, lessons of caution, observation, and the inexorable power of the little grey cells. And as dawn broke over Hawthorne Manor, casting a pale light into the drenched corridors, Poirot finally allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. The mystery was solved, the truth was revealed, and justice, though imperfect, had been served.